Hey, good evening, Julian. Thanks a lot for joining. Can we start with a short introduction for you?
Sure, yeah, thank you for having me here. So, this is Julian. I'm a DevOps and cloud engineer from Colombia. Uh, I've been working in the IT world for 6 years now. Um I'm really focused on AWS, so I have experience working with a lot of AWS services, mainly serverless, so Lambda API Gateway, Dynamo, but also with containers, ECS, Docker, infrastructure as code, um, with CloudFormation, Terraform, all the stuff that we handle on the DevOps world. And yeah, on the other side, I like to code on Python. Uh, I have Linux skills, so yeah, I really like Linux. Yeah, this is from the technical side. On the non-technical, I like to go out on the mountains during my time off, the weekends, and yeah, I think that's it. Short introduction.
Yeah, nice. Thanks. So you said you have been working with AWS for 6 years. That's quite
Yeah.
good. And so yeah, you said also that you're working on serverless. A lot of newcomers are really not sure if they should learn serverless because they feel that industry is not going to go to serverless because of cloud locking, blah blah blah. So, what is your experience? Do people really use serverless? Does the industry use serverless?
Yes. Definitely, yes. So, just to give you some context, I start working as sysadmin. So, I start working managing a lot of servers, a lot of stuff. So, when you have to administrate your own servers, you need to patch them, you need to install everything to keep them up to date, upgrade the kernel, for example, on Linux, upgrade the packages. So there are a lot of operations involved there, right? So as I progress on my career, I discovered that people don't want to do that manual work because that's usually like uh, boring work. You need to keep your systems up to date, you need to patch them, you need to administrate everything behind. So people don't want to do that, so they are moving to serverless. So when you have serverless, you don't need to worry about administrating your operating system, managing your platform, installing software, patchings, all those operations are managed by the vendor. So people really want to move that way because that makes life easier. Okay. So from my experience, I have seen that people don't want to administrate servers. They want to focus on making code, and that's all. They want to bring value to the customers. So they want to, for example, if they want to create a POC or a demo, they want to do it quickly, right? So the better way to do it is setting up something in serverless pretty quickly, and then write your code. You don't need to do anything else. So that's a big advantage. And the other advantage is obviously cost. So with cost, depending on the behavior of your application, that may vary, but many times you need applications running 24/7, right? You need your application running all the time for your users, but maybe you don't have like a lot of traffic always. So serverless is a good option for those type of behaviors because you're only paying for the user of your infrastructure. For example, if you only have like 10 users in a week, you're only paying for that, but your application is always up and running. So if you do it the traditional way with servers, you need to provision a server, maybe provision a load balancer, provision multiple servers behind the load balancer. You need to pay for all of those things, and maybe you need only for I don't know, for a few users. So that could be a waste of money, right? A waste of resources. So there are many advantages. Those are only two that came to my mind, but yeah, I know there are for sure many other advantages. So to answer your question, yes, people are moving to serverless more and more.
Okay, so that's a worthy investment if somebody really learns serverless. 'Cause I've seen a lot of people apprehensive about it that oh, very few people are going to use it, but that's not the case anymore. And people are using serverless, and it's a useful technology for the industry.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's something, it's something that will uh, grow more and more on
Okay,
the upcoming years. Yeah.
okay. So, what is your typical work? How is your day at work? What kind of work do you get?
So how's my typical day today? So basically, all the time involved with AWS services. So I have tasks that are defined when we prepare the sprint. So, for example, one task could be provision new infrastructure. So I need to write CloudFormation templates for that. One thing is we need to define a new architecture for a new application or for a new feature of the application. So I need to decide what is the correct way to do it. So, for example, I need to choose between, I don't know, using a relational or non-relational database. If I use relational, why relational, and what type of relational database. For example, in AWS, we can choose an engine like Postgres, we can choose MySQL, MariaDB, and we can also choose between RTS and Aurora. Architectural technical decisions of that kind. I usually write code, so there is always things to automate. So, for example, you need to clean up instances. I don't know, you need to process logs. So you need to write some sort of automation to do those type of tasks. So I like to write code in Python and always maintenance. So basically, you should have your systems up and running always. So there are always there is always maintenance to do, right? So you can when defining the sprint, you can create user stories to improve your systems, and obviously operations. So as you need to keep your system up, uh, you need to check for alerts, you need to check for logs. So basically observability things, just to keep your system healthy, up and running.
Okay, so that must be a taxing day or is it a leisurely day? How did, or it varies?
Uh, can you repeat that? I'm
Is it,
confused in the question.
yeah, like, is it a tough day? Do you get tired at the end of the day, or it's a leisurely work?
It really depends. There are days when you have like a lot of things and you end the day really tired, but there are days where you can really focus on what you want to do and you end your day early. So it really depends. I try to avoid disruptions because that's something that always delays your work. So yeah, I think that's key. But usually uh, I would say it's a really heavy work. I think it's cool, but it really depends, on the day, on the work that you need to do.
Okay. Um, yeah. So coming back to AWS, like, how should somebody learn AWS? Because most of the courses and YouTube videos are pretty superficial. Like, they tell you something about a service and very generic introduction to the service. Do the certification courses, even they don't really give you what you would need in the industry. That is
Yeah,
perhaps a lot more focus. So how did you learn?
yeah. For a person just starting on the cloud world, I'll say before even starting to learn AWS, focus on learning the basics of cloud. There are things that are core to cloud, like for example, networking. Learn OSI model, understand how the package go through the network, understand the basics of programming. There are some things that you need to know before getting involved on the cloud world. And then when you have those basics concepts, you can start by learning the core AWS services. When I say core AWS services, are the services that are usually used, um, and they don't depend on the type of architecture. For example, if you have a serverless architecture, you will use Lambda 99% of the time, right? But there are services that even if you use serverless or monolithic or microservices with containers, you will need to use, for example, VPC networking. So you need to understand how networks work on AWS. So public subnets, private subnets, VPNs, transit gateway, CIDRs, yeah, all those things, route tables. So you need to understand in detail how those work. Then you need to understand how compute works. So for compute, EC2, so the traditional servers. But on EC2, you have a lot of things. You have security groups, you have load balancers, you have all the scaling groups, target groups. That's usually, I'll say, like most of the times you'll need to know those services, because you will always have a load balancer and you'll need to understand how to use it. So good to know those. Storage, at least the most common services for storage. So S3, super important. S3 is a big service with many features, but at least understand how to interact with S3, how to store objects. Yeah, I think the basics are enough. And then EVS, that's the storage, the volume storage, that's pretty related to EC2 instances. And then understand databases, but databases is a big word. So I'll say understand what are the options that you have. So RDS is pretty popular. So you'll need to understand how the relational databases work on AWS. So understanding RDS is key. And then yeah, if you can like know, for example, DynamoDB or DocumentDB for non-relational, that would be good. But I think that's the core with those services that I mentioned before: EC2, S3, VPC, and I would say RDS. Those four services. At least you have an understanding of the core services of AWS, and if you need, like, for example, to design an architecture, that's a good base to start with. And for example, if you later need to work with serverless architecture or with microservices, or you need to design a network for your application, you'll have those basics because you already know how VPC work. You already know if you need to source something on S3. So yeah, I think focus on those core services is key. Then if you are interested to work uh, deeper with, I don't know, databases, you can, work, for example, with Redshift, Dynamo, DocumentDB. And if you are interested, for example, to work with other application services as an SNS, SQS, you can explore them. But yeah, I think those four services are core for me.
Okay. And you said cloud formation is also useful. As often people tend to ignore this infrastructure as code. They just videos just talk about making the services or accessing services through the console. How how important is cloud formation or Terraform, and which one would you recommend?
Yeah, That's a key service. Well, if we talk about cloud formation or if we talk about infrastructure as code, that's a key practice because at the end, you need to apply engineering best practices to your work as DevOps or cloud engineer, right? So uh, you need to, for example, if you want to migrate something or you want to replicate your infrastructure and you create that manually, you won't have control on what you have, right? The other advantage is when you have your infrastructure as code, uh, as it says, everything is as code. So you can apply the software engineering practices like create pull requests, peer review your code. For example, for Terraform, you can do unit testing. So you can bring the best of the software engineering world to managing your infrastructure, right? So you have a lot of advantage. You can scale your infrastructure easily because yeah, when you have only like one server and one database, you can create that manually. You won't see the benefits of infrastructure as code for a small infrastructure. But what if you want to scale your infrastructure? Yeah, you need to keep track of everything. You need to version everything. For example, if something goes wrong with your infrastructure, uh, you'll have to roll back to a previous state, and a way to do it is using version control, right, as Git. So if you have your infrastructure versioning on Git, you won't have that problem. So there are a lot of benefits. So yeah, that's the standard when working on DevOps and cloud. Use infrastructure as code.
Okay. Uh, Another uh, problem that people often face when they start working on cloud or DevOps is that there are too many technologies to learn. Is by the time you learn one, it is already outdated and you have few more in the market. So
Yeah.
how do you keep up?
So first thing is, as I mentioned before, you'll need to have like very good basics because the basics never change. So even if you have a lot of technologies, a lot of, for example, for container orchestration, you have Kubernetes, you have Mesos, you have ECS, you have a lot of things. But if you know well the basics, like as I mentioned before, networking, programming, it would be easier to learn a new tool, right? So that's one key aspect. And the other one is, yeah, there are a lot of tools for DevOps, for infrastructure as code, for everything, a lot of programming language. So I'll say not focus too much on the tool. Sometimes that's difficult because, for example, for Terraform is like, I don't know, it's used most of the times when managing infrastructure as code because that's pretty popular. But focus on the concepts. So if you understand what infrastructure as code is, you understand the best practices, you understand what is the purpose of infrastructure as code, you understand, for example, what is uh, a chain set in CloudFormation. In Terraform, you can do a plan and apply. If you understand those concepts for the different tools, it will be easier for you to learn a new tool. So my suggestion is know the basics. Second is know how the instead of tools know the concepts, and uh, probably your work will guide you to the tools because even if you, for example, like to work with Terraform, but in your work you use everyday CloudFormation, you will end up using CloudFormation, right? Because that's what you use every day. So yeah, it's there are many factors involved. My suggestion is know the basics, know the concepts behind the tool, and then you can try to learn something like pretty popular sometimes it's easier to get a job if you know the most popular tool. Like for example, if you know Terraform compared with Pulumi, you will get more job opportunities because that's more popular. So if you are interested on getting a job, you can go with the most popular tools on the market. So for example, infrastructure as code, Terraform, CI/CD, Jenkins, container orchestration, Kubernetes, and all the universe behind Kubernetes. So that's if you want to get a job easily, right? But it really depends on your career.
Okay. And one important thing you said is focus on the concepts rather than individual tools. But then the problem is who will teach me the concepts? Like I have a lot of tutorials on YouTube that tell you just the basic syntax of each tool. How should I learn the concepts?
Well, that's a good question. Actually, when you uh, when you learn, for example, for Terraform, there is good documentation for Terraform, and the official documentation of Terraform has some uh, tutorials that is like try to it gives you the tools to understand like how to manage your infrastructure correctly, and you will need to think this like not focus on a cloud provider on um, for example on VMware on on certain type of infrastructure, rather focus on what the tool uh, has to offer. Okay, so I don't really know about courses because, as you mentioned before, usually the courses are focused on certain tools. But for sure, on the base documentation, sometimes when you want to learn something, you go directly to the courses. I'll suggest go to the documentation, start with the documentation. I know, for example, for Terraform, they have like good basic concepts. So start with that. Then, if you want to learn like a specific tool, go with a course in any of the e-learning platforms. But start with the documentation. The documentation is good because that's a different. That's not focused on the tool, but most on the concept. So yeah, I think that's my suggestion.
Okay, so rather than going after videos and going through one tutorial after another, it's always a better idea to focus on the documentation first. Most
Yeah,
of
at
these have
least
a good documentation.
at least at a certain point. Then if you want to obviously learn Terraform, buy a course, do the hands-on, you will learn that. But yeah, for me it's good to understand the basic concepts before.
Okay, and that documentation is the best place to learn that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So, how did you choose this career, or how did you decide on AWS and DevOps?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I start, for a newbie in the IT world, it's difficult to comprehend all the tools available in this world because you have programming language, you have databases, you have tools for automation testing. It's this is crazy. Like, and you don't know what to do because you like to learn everything, but it's impossible to do it. So uh, how did I choose it? It was like destiny a little bit, and the other one is because at first I was really interested on Linux. So as I mentioned, I start working like managing servers, so doing the sysadmin work, installing packages, uh, checking logs, maintaining operating system, and I did that in a manual way. Okay, so then I discovered. At first, I thought that only servers exist, so only virtual servers, and that's only cloud. But then when I saw all the available options on the cloud, and when I discovered that this is not only virtual servers. I was like, wow, it was like I can't really think of all the options available in the cloud. So I was really interested on that part. So I decided to get more involved. I decided to learn. I decided to understand how things work on the cloud, and basically that was my choice. It was because I was working with Linux. I could interact with cloud, and then when I saw all the possibilities, I decided to go that way.
Okay, that's nice. And you have done a few certifications on AWS.
Yes, I have done a couple. Yep.
Okay. So what is the value of these certificates? Do they make a difference, or is the investment meaning what is what is the return you get from these investments?
Yeah, that's people. There are divide like some people like certification, or people think that they are like useless because it it doesn't mean that because you have a certification. So my position is, when you try to get a certification, you'll need to learn, because you'll need to study, you'll need to spend a lot of time learning new things. So yes, you will learn a lot. Even, for example, if you don't have the experience, a real experience with that tool, you will learn by studying the theoretical concepts and by doing labs. So that's better than nothing. Okay, so uh, that's a good point of certifications. You'll need to learn. And second one, it depends on the type of industry that you work. For example, I work in consultancy services. So basically, uh, when you get into a project, uh, you are evaluated on some skills, the skills that the project needs. So, for example, if the project needs someone uh, that is an expert with AWS, is easier to validate with certifications, because obviously certification doesn't mean that you know the topic, but if you have a certification, it's more probable that you know more than other person that doesn't have a
Okay,
certification. So it's I think it's worth to do it. It's because you learn, and it's because it can help your career.
okay. So it's one way of forcing yourself into it, and also a good parameter for someone to evaluate you.
Yeah, on the consultancy industry at least,
Okay,
because yeah, on other industries I don't know, but on consultancy I think it's worth.
okay. Because you meet a new customer every day, so you cannot expect the person to know you so well. So a stamp from AWS is always helpful.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so what would you be doing if you were not doing IT? Did you have any other industry in your mind?
Like anything not related to IT.
Mm.
Well, I always like sports, but at my age, I now discover that I'm pretty lazy. So I don't know if if I'll choose sports. I don't know. I've worked. I started with electronics back like 15 years ago. So since I have memory, I've been like, even with electronics or IT, they're pretty close, because electronics are the base for IT. So yeah, I can't imagine doing something different than
Oh,
IT or electronics. Yeah, maybe electronics is
okay,
the industry that I will work on. Yeah.
okay, that's nice. And finally, how would you advise a fresh graduate if somebody asks you for a career advice? How should I go about in the industry? What would be your first advice?
Okay, so first thing, identify what you like. So there are many options on the IT world, and if you like the IT world, identify what you like. For example, in my case, I try many times to start programming in Java, and I really couldn't because I didn't like that. So I like to code, but I didn't want to do that like a developer every day. So I identified back when I start that I didn't want to be a programmer or developer. I wanted to be involved on the IT world, but not on that role. So first thing, identify what you like, and second, based on what you expect from your career, identify what are the job opportunities, because you always need to check if what you want to do has job opportunities, right? So explore the market in your country or even abroad. Explore what are the job opportunities. Talk with guys that are doing what you want to do. Get advice from them. So, for example, ask what technologies to learn, ask what to expect in 2, 3, 5, 10 years. Um, Ask yourself if you see yourself working on this work in 10 years, for example, as a manager or as a subject matter expert. So visualize yourself if you want this for your life. Okay. So, yeah, just to summarize, identify what you like, identify job opportunities for what you like, get advice from people that is already on that world, and visualize yourself working on that thing. So, at medium or long term, visualize yourself and see if you want to live that life.
That's good. You have given a few interesting insights about how to learn something from the documentation rather than from the short tutorials. That's a very important point that we often miss. That video tutorials are tempting because they let us become lazy. But sometimes the documentation is more important than that. That's a very good point
Yes.
here about identifying your interest in the domain that you're working. That's a very good point. That's nice. Thanks a lot for your inputs. I'm sure our audience will
Okay.
benefit from that.
That's fine. Yeah, I hope yeah, for new people coming into this world, that they find this helpful. And yeah, if they want to reach out to me asking for more details, more questions about what I know, AWS and DevOps, yeah, you can do it. So